Okay, so you might have noticed that things in Hollywood are a bit of a mess right now. The writers have been on strike for months, since May. But as of today, the actors are also on strike. Not only that, but there is serious doubt about the future of the streaming model. Today on the show, how did Hollywood get so broken? I'm Elamin Abdelmahmoud. This is Commotion. Listen, normally we reserve the show for our end of the week group chat. We talk about the biggest stories of the week. We have a lot of laughs and so on, but this week is different. This week is different because there is really one big story. Hollywood actors are on strike as of today. The writers have been picketing since May. There are a lot of questions about where the industry goes from here. And to me, the story that lies underneath all of these stories is the studios and the streamers are perhaps more powerful than they've ever been. So who has power in Hollywood and how did it come to this? Kathryn VanArendonk from Vulture is here. Chris Murphy from Vanity Fair is here. Canadian TV writer Kathryn Borel is here. She's also a Writers Guild strike captain based in LA. Kathryn, Chris, welcome to Commotion, everybody.
Hello.
Hi.
Happy Bastille Day.
Listen, I do not mean to be very formal when it comes to this, but Kathryn VanArendonk and Kathryn Borel, I'm going to use both of yours full names in conversation, but maintain a very informal vibe, okay? That's what we're going to do. Okay, so let's get into it. Fran Drescher is the president of the Actors Union. Here's a bit of her speech yesterday announcing that the actors are going on strike.
I cannot believe it. Quite frankly, how far apart we are on so many things, how they plead poverty, that they're losing money left and right when giving hundreds of millions of dollars to their CEOs. It is disgusting. Shame on them.
I have to say that, the writers have been on strike for some time. There's not a writer that I know so well as much as I know the voice of the nanny and I know the nanny so well. So there's something so personal about the way that the actors are able to make this appeal. Chris, when you were watching that, what was your reaction to it?
I mean, you sort of took the words out of my mouth. I mean, anyone could be the SAG-AFTRA president at this time, but to have it be Fran Drescher, who is such an iconic voice and is sort of such, represents a time when the industry was kinder to actors and writers in the 90s and sitcoms and residual pay and really represents sort of a different era of the industry. To have her on the front lines, it's really fantastic. And she really cut through with the emotion, but also made it very clear that the studios and the streamers have no interest in sort of supporting actors and the non-A-list actors, the working actors, because most actors are not Fran Drescher. They're, day players and guest stars and whatnot, and they don't have nanny money. They don't have the gravy train of the nanny to rely on in this day and age.
Kathryn VanArendonk, I have to say that it was we talked about the way that the writer's strike has all these little viral moments when a writer has a wonderful sign that they're holding up at the picket line. It is entirely different territory because we can connect to actors if they're making the appeal directly on behalf of the Actors Union. So let's talk a little bit about the power of actors and how they have, a different kind of power than the writers do here.
Yeah, I mean, it is really funny to me, actually, that the actors are striking and that one of the major issues is whether or not AI can be allowed to scan your likeness and then your face is used forever, because that is exactly the thing that studios want, because they know how powerful it is. They know how powerful it is to have your face and to be able to use that familiar face in whatever way a story that they decide needs for it to be used. And so for it to be exactly those same faces that are now the ones that are saying, guess what? You can't take our face. That this is the thing that is powerful. And we are now going to demonstrate how powerful it is to you by showing up on a picket line. It just feels so incredibly ill-conceived of the studios to have let it get this bad. And it is really, I am very very curious what the messaging is going to look like for the next several weeks as they attempt to ignore, seeing incredibly famous movie stars talking about these issues.
I mean, to that end, one of the most famous movie stars on the planet yesterday had to leave the premiere of his movie. So Matt Damon and the rest of the cast of Oppenheimer, which comes out next week, they had to leave the premiere in solidarity with the union. And here's Matt Damon talking about the strike, the potential strike, before it even happened.
Nobody wants a work stoppage, but if our leadership is saying that the deal isn't fair, then we got to hold strong till we get a deal that's fair for working actors. It's the difference between having health care and not for a lot of actors, and we got to do what's right by them.
That's Matt Damon, man. That's an incredibly famous Academy Award nominated Matt Damon. You just get a different level of wattage in terms of attention to these issues. But Kathryn Borel, we should talk about the fact that it is day 74 of your strike. Yeah, it's day 1 for your friends who are actors. How are you holding up 74 days into this thing?
Well, it was one of the great things about SAG is that they've been showing up since day 1 as well. And I think they were preparing for the reality that they might strike because their existential issues are very similar to our existential issues, in terms of the idea of likeness, voice, and face. We are worried about the fact that our voices, our feelings, a friend of mine who's a writer said something great at the beginning of the strike, which is that it's existential because what we feel is what you see if we're doing our jobs right on TV. And that's also what's being undermined in terms of the AI question and component of it. So selfishly, obviously, having a bunch of high profile drama queens on the line is going to be absolutely amazing in terms of sort of reinfusing the lifeblood of the line. But I really want to say they've been out with us since day 1. Flavor Flav sends pizzas to us. We get food trucks from them. I've eaten a slice of Flavor Flav pizza. It's great. It was pepperoni. He brings them. He hand delivers them to the line. But no, it's the fact that they've been out there since day 1 and now they're out here legitimately with us. I think it is going to give us so much of a longer arc in terms of what this is. Unfortunately, I think it will make it go on for longer, but at the same time, there's no choice. We have to be in this fight because if we're not, we won't have jobs to go back to. We won't have an industry to go back to that's sustainable. So it's necessary.
So the day before the actors went on strike, Kathryn VanArendonk, Deadline published a story that made quite a few waves across the internet. And the story was like maybe some kind of unnamed source talking on behalf of the studio saying that the strategy is to hold out until writers basically can't pay their rent anymore. And it really sort of seemed to have set the mood. It seemed to sort of like make the air a little bit more toxic in terms of like the conversations between these two parties. What will it take for the studios to actually budge in this context?
Yeah, it's a really good question. It's a question that I think actually nobody has a good answer to at this point, because everyone does feel so far apart on some of these issues. And because if you read some of the reporting that, is close to management side, studio side, the studio seems to feel that it is also existential for them, that they are having a hard time making money. And so this is not an issue that people are going to be very easy, ready to come back to the table over very quickly. One of the things that I do think is really fascinating, and I am going to be really excited to see how it plays out over the next several weeks or months, is that the studios are not the same kind of monolithic block that they were in the 2007-2008 strike.
Yeah.
That is a group that now includes old school like NBC type models and Netflix and Prime, and nobody knows how Prime makes its money or what those shows actually do for them.
Yeah.
And so the idea that they have to negotiate as a block is, I think, increasingly going to become one of the big questions about how this plays out.
Yeah, when we keep hearing about how several of the studios are like, we're ready for a deal, but then there are a couple that are holdouts, but nobody ever wants to name which ones are the holdouts at this point. Chris, we've already seen this enormous impact because of the writer's strike. What happens now that the actors are out as well?
I mean, we got to sort of just sort of buckle down and brace ourselves for a very sort of non-A-list summer and fall. We're going to lose a lot of things that we look forward to. I know it's hard to say, but the Emmys, they're probably not going to happen. They're definitely probably not going to happen in September. Maybe they'll get postponed to November, or some are saying maybe even, January. Our beloved film festivals, our Venices, our TIFFs, these are not going to have star power. Maybe they'll film the movies, but stars are not allowed to sort of go and do any FYC campaigns or sort of show up to any events.
They can't even post trailers online. Like it's
Nope.
that level of sort of blackout.
It is that level of blackout. It is that serious. It's that much of a hard line in the sand. And even sort of worse, if you will, we're not going to be able to sort of get our new seasons of shows, right? Our season 3 of Abbott Elementary, our season 3 of The Bear. Actors cannot show up to set. Writers are not writing scripts. We're going to be in sort of like a scripted series blackout for the time being. And we're going to probably see a lot of reality TV and a lot of unscripted television come to the forefront in this time. So get ready to sort of turn on Bravo and meet some housewives.
Let's go for another Deal or No Deal season.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Really?
we should say, okay, so my guests are Kathryn VanArendonk from Vulture, Chris Murphy from Vanity Fair, and from LA we have Kathryn Borel, who's a Canadian screenwriter and current Writers Guild strike captain. It is the first day of the Hollywood actors strike, and we are talking about everything that is going on in Hollywood. If there's a thesis that I would say we're unpacking here, it's that Hollywood is much more broken than anyone thought. Maybe I'll put this to Kathryn VanArendonk. There used to be a time from 1970-ish to the early 2000s when you had the FinCEN systems in place, right? Which is the idea that the network can't actually own the thing that they broadcast. And the whole idea was it allowed writers to be oh, I don't like dealing with this network. I'm going to take my business across the street and go somewhere else. We've seen that those rules kind of get gradually weakened and weakened and weakened. And then before you know it, you have the studio system sort of vertical integration, which is to say they make the thing and also they air the thing. And suddenly everybody has way fewer spaces to literally just sell the shows that they're making. And then streaming enters that whole foray. In terms of what we notice as viewers, do we notice any difference in terms of this ecosystem? And how is it different for a writer or an actor dealing with this much more consolidated kind of Hollywood?
Yeah. So for a writer and an actor, I mean, you've just described exactly how it's different. And all you have to do is read any kind of strike reporting to see sort of how this system has changed dramatically for the worse for the people who are in these industries. It is so hard to make any kind of living. The kinds of reliable income that you used to be able to have very much dried up. And the industry was already going to be looking for some kind of contraction after this sort of peak TV frenzy of the last several years. The combination of that plus the way that streaming had already just completely slashed any kind of reliable income, it is desperate times for people who are trying to work in these fields. For viewers, I think it's a very interesting question that is not as easy to say what the experience is, because there has also been this exactly what the streamers promised, which is it's the Burger King style, have it your way version of television. People
Yes.
People get to watch the shows they want to watch. You are not stuck with the same kind of monolithic, only 3 network comedies a night sort of a thing.
Yeah.
And it has expanded what TV looks like in a really dramatic and valuable and important way. A show like Reservation Dogs would not be on television 20 years ago. Mm-hmm. And so, you can't completely say that there has only been one way that this arc has gone. It is a much more complex problem.
Yeah.
But to that same point, viewers are very aware that those shows that they love, they get canceled. And I think because of social media, we are also now, it is so much more transparent when the writers of the shows that we love, the actors of those shows say, actually, this was a nightmarish experience for me. And I can't afford to buy the box set of the show that I was in. So, yeah.
That's a real quote, by the way. That's a real quote from someone who worked on Orange is the New Black and said, they couldn't get paid enough after they left that experience to literally purchase the box set of the show that they worked on. Kathryn Borel, let's talk about this, I guess, from a personal level, because if there is all this consolidation of power in Hollywood, how hard has it become to make a living as a writer in Hollywood?
Well, and just to go back to one thing that Kathryn was saying, and I agree with everything that she was saying, but the one thing is that Hollywood, the power structure of Hollywood, it's been broken forever. It's a matter of where the power falls, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And if you read the book Burn It Down, which came out last month, it's a great examination of exactly how and why it has been broken. And the answer is powerful men in positions who, in powerful men in powerful positions who do not value the work that creative people do and take advantage of the sensitivities of writers and actors on a minute-to-minute basis in order to make money. But no, I mean, on a personal level, so I moved to LA in 2010, really thinking, with two suitcases off the bus, thinking like, I'm here to write the movies, guys. Like, give me my paycheck. And as it turns out, it's obviously it's a lot harder. It took me about 2.5 years to break in, which actually is not that long of a time. But when I was first working, I could sell one show and staff on one show and make a really nice, not a crazy living, not a living where I can buy a house, but certainly a living where I'm eating food, I'm paying rent on time, I'm paying my utilities on time, and that happened essentially until sort of 2018, 2019. And then suddenly I was finding myself, and obviously the pandemic hit, so that changed things too. But these, just to give you a little bit of a snapshot of what I was doing right before we went on strike, and I was working literally until the minute that the strike was called. I wrote 3 different episodes of television. I wrote a pilot and 2 episodes, of one for an Apple show, one for a Netflix show. The Apple show is a mini room. These horrible things that have happened since I've arrived in the business, which is just you take 8 weeks, you try to break an entire season of television, which used to take 24 weeks or 32 weeks, and everything has become contracted. You work at a breakneck pace, you write everything, and then you hope, Chad or Jeremy at Apple reads the whole thing and goes here you go, here's the money to actually go and shoot your show. But so I wrote 3 different episodes of TV. I finished a movie. I did 2 pitches and truly had a nervous breakdown at the end. It was the most work I'd ever done. I was working 110-hour weeks for 4 weeks before the strike happened, and sort of 80-hour weeks before that. And I'm coming into the strike with luckily enough money to get me through for probably 10 months or a year if it goes on for hopefully will not go on for that long. But we used to have the ability to make a cushion because of residuals, because of longer rooms. You could sock away more money because the contracts were longer, and you were getting those green envelopes, which are the residual checks, and those just don't happen as much anymore. And that's what makes it an unsustainable framework for those of us who are writing. And we need rest in order to do a good job. We need to go outside and take in what is happening in the world in order to synthesize it and process it and make it into something valuable for you guys to watch. And if we don't have that time, it's just all you're going to see is a bunch of shows about people sitting in a room being like, how am I going to pay my rent?
Which I feel like we've seen some of those shows. They're not that great. Chris, maybe I'll put this to you. There's something to be said about the fact that last year we there was all these headlines about peak TV because, it was the most pilots ever launched ever, because you could do that in this moment, right? But it does, when we get to this negotiation, you kind of get the sense that this is a bit more of a farming system than anything else. There's a little bit less attention paid to the quality of the stuff that they're greenlighting necessarily, because they are it feels like they're just trying to feed as many things just out. Be like, I hope this works. I hope Julia Roberts in a TV show works. I hope somebody watches this. And it turns out, actually, nobody watched that show. I literally can't even remember the name of it as we speak.
Gaslit. It's called,
which is funny
Gaslit,
to not be able to remember.
Not to gaslight you, but it's called Gaslit.
Delightful. Thank you for reminding me of this. But no, there's something to be said about the fact that it feels like the people who put on TV shows are not necessarily in the business of making art anymore. They're a little bit in the business of just pure volume. Am I right in reading that?
Oh, totally. I mean, peak TV has definitely peaked, and now we're sort of, crescendoing down, if you will, from the golden age of our Mad Men's, our Breaking Bads and whatnot. Because I think, as you said, there's a lot of breadth and little depth. I mean, to look at the Emmy nominations, if we look at the only network that really, there are full categories that are just HBO. HBO is the top 3 nominated shows. Succession has 27 nominations. The White Lotus has 24, and I think The Last of Us has 23. I might have switched the last two. But that just shows that the quality is really consolidating in one space, and other networks aren't even really trying to be competitive in that way anymore. Netflix is sort of out of the game. They have so many shows, and they're really not creating original content with an eye toward quality, because people will sort of click on anything. And there's no really money to be gained in that. So we're seeing definitely we've sort of gone over the shelf into quantity over quality land. But the thing is, because these streamers don't tell us any numbers, they're not making any money even by churning out content and content and content. So it seems, it's sort of a lose-lose.
Well, Kathryn, I'm really glad that Chris brought up the metric point, because one of the big sticking points with this actor strike is actors want a success sort of metric added onto their contract. Like, if the show does really well, I should be able to get paid a little bit more than this. However, streamers are notoriously so protective about their data that they don't even want to commit to any kind of way of measuring success publicly, because that kind of makes them basically give up some kind of power. What do you make of how strongly streamers are sort of holding on to their essentially holding on to their all their information and not wanting to release it? That's to Kathryn VanArendonk, by the way.
Yeah. So this is a really important, a vital question about how these negotiations play out, because writers and actors, the people who make these shows, cannot negotiate their contracts. They cannot make a living if they do not understand how valuable they are to these streaming platforms. Nobody loved Nielsen ratings. Nobody was like, wow, Nielsen's, I'm so happy I have these numbers to know that my show is failing. But at least it was this agreed upon way where you could be like, they didn't promote us enough. And everyone's like, sure, buddy. And like, we know why you're being canceled. And it's too bad. But that is sometimes how this goes. Right now, it is a complete black box. Nobody understands whether a show matters to Amazon because people watch it, or whether a show matters to Amazon because it makes people buy products on Prime, right? And without any of that information about how a show is valuable to you, you cannot say, like, yes, I know who's watching my show and I understand why I am important to you, and thus you need to pay me more. And so you are trying to play poker, and they have two cards and you have no cards, which is an impossible
That's
game
not how you
play.
play poker. Yeah.
Well, I don't. Okay, fine.
No, I just mean you would lose in that particular case.
Yeah.
Kathryn,
just to piggyback off what Kathryn was saying, because it's such a good point. And when you talked earlier about, like, who are the holdouts? We don't know. And it's like, we kind of do. What the biggest holdout, as far as I've been told, is Netflix, because it's their only business model, right? Apple has alternative revenue streams. Amazon, you can buy everything off Amazon. Netflix are the one that we're like, oh God, what have we done? All we've got is this. We had DVDs and now we've got streaming, and then we turned into Walmart and we've got nothing else to sell you. So that we know that they're the ones that are going hardest to the mat in these negotiations, because they've got nothing else.
So I have to say, I had all kinds of plans to talk about the Emmys, to ask you guys for recommendations, and we just don't. We're running out of time to do that because there's just so much to talk about. Like, I feel like we're just kind of scratching the surface, and I want to have more of these conversations. But maybe last word will be connecting both the strike and also the Emmys, which is this question is to Kathryn Borel. Kathryn, Brittany Nichols is a TV writer from Abbott Elementary. She wrote this really moving post saying she'd normally be celebrating the fact that she was nominated. She'd normally be campaigning for herself and for her show to win, but she can't, because if she does that, she'd be doing work for the studio. She'd be sort of carrying water for the studio. How does that comment land for you? You're picketing with Brittany almost every day.
Yeah, Brittany is a morning strike captain. I'm an afternoon strike captain, so we pass each other at Warner Brothers. I was a huge fan of her work before. She's hilarious. She's an amazing person to see on the line every day. And if I don't know her well at all, but if I've picked up something from her, it's that she's going to be able to divert the energy that she would have gone into Emmy campaign season and all of the celebrations and the gala, everything. And she's going to use that. She's going to redirect that energy into what I think is we're not going to have Emmys anymore if it's going the way that it goes. So I know that she'll be, her and all of the people who do such a great job and are such incredible creatives. And she's an amazing example because she's WGA and SAG. She's going to use all of that energy and redirect it into something worthwhile for the cause itself. And I think that's what we're going to see. And I think it's a small price to pay to not have Emmys, to not have Venice, to not have TIFF, so that we can all continue to make a sustainable living.
Well, Kathryn, Chris, I appreciate all of you being here. Thank you so much for this. I feel like we need like another 2 hours to get through everything, but thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
Of course. Okay, it is time for some quick recommendations. Please tell me what I should do with my life this weekend. Kathryn, what is Project Greenlight, and why do you think this is the show that everyone should be watching right now?
Project Greenlight is a show that was on HBO over a decade ago. The idea of it is that first-time filmmakers they are in a contest, one is chosen, and then they get to make a movie, and then we watch them make this movie. There is a new season that is on Max. It just came out yesterday, and it picks up exactly in the tradition of where Project Greenlight left off, which is that the movies that get made are never, ever good. And instead, what happens is a somewhat intentional and often fascinatingly unintentional document of all of the ways that Hollywood is a disastrous system, and it is a miracle anything makes it onto screen. I love this show. I really love this season. It is every single episode is called The Problem With Something, and the problems only get worse and more bonkers. And I'm not even sure how I feel about that. Like, I need other people to watch it and come yell with me. Please.
I'm sold. I've seen your tweets being like, please watch Project Greenlight, then come yell about it with me. So I will watch it, then I'm going to join you in the yelling. Let's go. Chris, what about you? What are you loving right now?
I gotta say, it's a little bit controversial, but I am so looking forward to every episode of And Just Like That. It is not a perfect show. It is, some would say, probably bad, and I actually understand that. But what I will say is that it really has, in its second season, followed into this sort of like wonderful space and sort of course corrected from the first season, which was sort of a long sort of grief funeral dirge of Carrie getting over Big's death. Yeah. And now we're into a place that's like a little bit more fun. It's a little bit more sexy. It's a little bit more reminiscent of the Sex and the City that we know and love from, 25 years ago, but with, women of a certain age dealing with problems that befall women of a certain age. Yeah. They're having dry orgasms. They're helping their daughters buy condoms. It's fun. It's deranged and it's fun. And I can't say it's good, but I look forward to every episode, and it feels like a warm blanket that I can wrap myself into.
We should tell people you also host a podcast about the show, because you're so into it that you're like, I'm breaking down every episode every single week.
Still watching for Vanity Fair, and it's interesting. And we talked to Cynthia Nixon recently, and she right before the strike, and getting into Miranda's head and her directing now. It's good. There's good stuff there. You just got to wade through some cringe to get to some really good stuff.
I'll tell you this: I liked the first season. I am one of those people. I'm willing to even say that. But what I was laughing at is how sheepish, how small you made your body. As you're like, and just like that is my recommendation. Kathryn Borel, last word to you. What's getting you through the long days of the picket line?
I just finished the third and fourth seasons of a show called Last Chance U, which is on Netflix, my enemy. But it's I don't know if you've I don't know if you've watched it, but it's Greg Whiteley, who also did the series Cheer. It's an unscripted series that follows a group of junior college basketball players at East Los Angeles College. And it's this group of guys who have essentially flunked out of either the NBA or D1 and D2 college sports programs because sort of a lack of support. And they all fall under the auspices of this incredible coach named John Mosley, who's the head coach and remains the head coach of ELAC in East Los Angeles. And it's just, it's grisly. It's full of heart. And it sort of speaks to what is America, which is, you've got this group of kids where because of the lack of social support systems and just the lack of networks and all of the ways in which America fails its people, they're here. It's their last chance. And basketball was plan A, and Coach Mosley is trying to make that that plan come true. And it just, if you don't cry at the end of every episode, you gotta check yourself for a soul, because it's a wonderful show.
I have to say, the phrase "full of heart" is exactly how you get me to watch anything. Like, it doesn't matter what it is. It could be the worst thing ever made, and you go like, but it's full of heart. I'm like, I'm in, I'm sold. So thank you for these recommendations, and thank you to each one of you for being on the show. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Of course. Kathryn VanArendonk from Vulture is in New Jersey. Chris Murphy from Vanity Fair is in New York. And Kathryn Borel is a Canadian screenwriter and currently a Writers Guild strike captain based in LA. And that is it for the show today. But listen, before I go, I just want to quickly tell you about the amazing team that helps get the show on the air. Commotion is produced by Stuart Berman, Ty Callender, Gene Kim, Jane Van Couverden, Jess Lowe. Our digital producer is Amelia Ekbal. Jane Van Couverden is also directing today's show. Our engineer is Sam Hashmi. The senior producers this week are Danielle Grogan and John Perry. The executive producer is Anne McKeegan. My name is Elamin Abdelmahmoud. It has been a pleasure being with you today. I'll see you next week.